Poverty has a bitter taste. It is not the metallic taste of starvation, nor the dry taste of dust. It is the taste of humiliation swallowed with lukewarm tea served in chipped cups. It is the taste of polishing the silverware that once belonged to your grandmother so that vulgar strangers can eat with it. It is the taste of lowering your head when the same people who danced with you at debutante balls now snap their fingers demanding more sugar, pretending not to recognize Viscount Moretti's daughter beneath the black governess uniform. I was Clara Moretti, heiress of Wind Manor, educated in French, piano, and etiquette. Now I was just the girl. The house was still the same moss-green velvet curtains that blocked the pale, eternal light of London. The same Persian carpets where I learned to walk, now worn by time, and the heavy footsteps of the new owners. The estate belonged to the Thornfields, coal merchants who bought my father's debt along with the walls that sheltered us. They kept me out of charity, they told their friends. I knew it was for trophy. Having a ruined noblewoman serve them was the height of social status in a society that valued blood, but worshipped gold. On that rainy November afternoon, the house was in a frenzy. An important guest was arriving. "Royalty," the maids whispered in the kitchen, eyes wide with fear and fascination. "One of the ancients." I knew what that meant. Victorian society pretended they didn't exist, hiding them under layers of politeness and denial. But everyone knew. The clans, the wolves, the dark aristocracy that ruled London's underworld with iron claws and velvet gloves. They were the city's true owners, the predators at the top of the food chain. I was in the library, the only place where I still felt like myself, dusting the books my father loved, when the door opened. There was no announcement, no heavy footsteps, just a sudden, violent change in air pressure, the scent of cold rain, expensive tobacco, and something dangerously masculine and savage flooded the room, overwhelming the comforting smell of wax and old paper. I turned, the feather duster clutched against my chest like a useless shield. He stood in the doorway, tall, impeccable in a severely cut black suit that screamed Savile Row tailoring, a dark wool overcoat draped over his broad shoulders, jet black hair, slicked back, revealing a face of hard, aristocratic lines, pale as marble under the gaslight. He wore black leather gloves and held a silver-handled cane shaped like a snarling wolf's head. His eyes were what paralyzed me. Dark forest green, cold, calculating, without a trace of human warmth. These were eyes that didn't see people. They saw assets and liabilities. King Valerius Blackwood, the alpha of business, the man who controlled half of London's trade and all of the clan's bloody politics. Behind him, Mr. Thornfield, my employer, was sweating, his handkerchief crumpled in his plump hands. "Your Grace, this is just the governess. We can go to the living room. I've prepared the brandy." "Get out," Valerius said. His voice was velvet over gravel. Low, cultured, but with an absolute authority that made the window panes vibrate. But Valerius merely turned his head. Millimeters. A silent warning. Thornfield paled, muttered stuttered excuses, and left, closing the door with a final click. We were alone. I, the ruined governess, and the most dangerous predator in the city. He walked to the central oak table. The sound of his cane tapping the rug was muffled but rhythmic, like a metronome counting the time I had left. Tack, tack, tack. "Miss Clara Moretti," he said, without looking at me. He began removing his gloves, finger by deliberate finger, revealing large, pale, strong hands. Hands that could sign a treaty or snap a neck with the same ease. 23 years old, father deceased, invalid mother living in a charity asylum in the East End, coughing up her lungs in the cold. Total family debt, £50,000. My blood ran cold. The mention of my mother was a physical blow. "How do you know that?" He finally looked at me. The weight of that green gaze nearly made me buckle. "I know the price of everything in London, Miss Moretti, including yours. I am not for sale, my lord." My voice trembled, betraying my fear, but I kept my chin high. Pride was the only thing the creditors hadn't taken, and I would not surrender it to him. "Everything is for sale," he corrected coolly, placing the gloves on the table with surgical precision. "The only question is the currency." He pulled a rolled parchment from the inside pocket of his coat. The sound of the paper unrolling on the polished wood was loud in the library's silence. "A proposal," he said. I approached cautiously, as if the paper might bite me. It was a contract. Elegant lettering, red wax seal with the wolf's crest. "Read it." My eyes scanned the lines, my heart pounding in my throat. Contract of union. Parties, Valerius Blackwood and Clara Moretti. Object, marriage. Duration, 1 calendar year. Duties of the contractee. Impeccable public appearance. Management of the Blackwood residence. Accompaniment to high society and clan council social events. Compensation. Full discharge of the Moretti family debts. Restitution of Wynd Manor property. Lifelong pension, and full medical treatment for the widow Moretti. I gasped, the paper shaking in my hands. This is a farce. "It is a business deal," he corrected impassively. "My grandfather, Grand Duke Lorenzo, is dying. He is a stubborn old man who demands to see me married and stabilized before passing on full control of the clan council. He values ancient lineage and blue blood above all else. Things you have in abundance, even if you don't have a roof over your head. And what do I gain, besides dirty money? Dignity," he replied, and the brutal honesty of the word cut me. "You reclaim your home. You get your mother out of that filthy hole where she is slowly dying. You become someone again, Lady Moretti. Instead of cleaning the mess of new money who don't know how to use a fish fork." I closed my eyes. The image of my mother, pale and thin, coughing blood into a soiled handkerchief during my last visit, flooded my mind. The doctor said she needed fresh air, good food, constant heating, things my governess salary would never buy. I opened my eyes and pointed to the bottom of the page. And the other clauses? Clause 4. No marital intimacy. Separate bedrooms. No heirs. The marriage will be legally dissolved after the stipulated period. "I do not need an heir," Valerius said, his voice growing even colder, if that were possible. He looked out the window at the rain. "And I have no interest whatsoever in romance or the complications of affection. I need a business partner who knows how to hold a teacup and converse with ambassadors without stammering. You were educated for this. It is your only marketable skill right now." His coldness was a physical barrier. He spoke of marriage, of union, as if it were the acquisition of property or a corporate merger. "You want a doll," I accused, bitterness leaking into my voice. "A trophy wife to put on a shelf and show your grandfather." "I want a solution," he countered, turning his green eyes back to me. "And you need salvation. It's a fair trade. No one loses." He picked up a quill pen, dipped the tip into the silver inkwell on the table, and extended it to me. The pen's shaft was warm from his touch. "Sign, Clara. And your mother sleeps in silk sheets and a heated room tonight. Refuse, and continue serving tea to people who don't deserve to clean your shoes." I looked at the pen. I looked at him. He was handsome in a terrible way, like a storm or a precipice. Untouchable. An ice king on a throne of shadows. Marrying him would be entering the wolf's den voluntarily, selling my freedom for security. But then I thought of Wynd Manor. I thought of reclaiming my mother's piano. I thought of never having to say, "Yes, sir," to Mr. Thornfield again. Pride doesn't fill the stomach, and a governess's freedom is only the freedom to choose which floor to clean. I took the pen. My hand was shaking, but my decision was not. 1 year, I whispered. 1 year, he confirmed. And afterward, you will never have to see my face or hear my name again. I signed. The black ink stained the paper, spreading into the fibers like a root, sealing my fate. Clara Moretti. Valerius retrieved the contract as soon as I released the pen. He did not smile. There was no relief on his face, no triumph, just the efficient satisfaction of a problem solved. He rolled up the parchment and put it away. He picked up his cane. He put his gloves back on, hiding the skin, hiding the man. "Pack your bags," he commanded, walking toward the door. "The carriage waits outside. Take nothing from this house that is not strictly personal. New suitable clothes await you at Blackwood Manor." "Now?" I asked, my voice failing. "Now. The engagement will be announced in the papers tomorrow morning. The wedding in 3 days. There is no time to waste on goodbyes." He opened the door. "Valerius," I called, using his first name for the first time. It felt strange, heavy on my tongue. He stopped, his hand on the knob, his back broad and straight. He didn't turn around. "Why me? There are many ruined ladies in London. Prettier, more docile." There was a long silence. The sound of rain hitting the window seemed to fill the space between us. "Because you didn't cry," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "When you lost everything, when I listed your debts, you didn't cry, and I need someone who won't break." He walked out, closing the door behind him. I stood alone in the library. His scent, tobacco, rain, and power, still lingered in the air, ghostly. I looked at my hands. The ink on my index finger looked like a stain of guilt that would never wash off. I had sold myself, but my mother would sleep in silk. I wiped away a solitary, furious tear that dared to escape the corner of my eye. He said he chose me because I wouldn't break. I would have to prove him right, even if it cost me my soul. The journey to Blackwood Manor was an exercise in isolation. Valerius did not accompany me in the carriage. He rode alongside, a shadowy guard mounted on a black stallion, the rain dripping from his hat and cape. I was alone in the velvet interior, watching London pass through the wet curtains, saying goodbye to the life I knew. The mansion stood on the outskirts of the city, where industrial smog mixed with the natural mist of the marshlands. It was Gothic, imposing, with stone gargoyles watching from the roof and tall windows that looked like empty black eyes. High stone walls and wrought iron gates separated the Blackwood world from the rest of humanity. I was received not as a bride, but as a valuable acquisition. An army of silent servants bathed me, scrubbing my skin red, applying perfumed oils that cost more than my entire life. They cut my hair, manicured my nails, dressed me in heavy silks and antique jewels that felt like golden chains. And then, 3 days later, the wedding. The mansion's private chapel was a place of shadows and cold, gray stone, dark stained glass windows that barely let light through. There were no flowers, no music, no smiling guests, just the justice of the peace, a small trembling man, and an old man seated in a wheelchair in the front row, Grand Duke Lorenzo, the grandfather. He looked like a corpse that refused to lie down, skin thin as paper, milky eyes that seemed to see right through me, skeletal hands clinging to the armrests, but there was a sharp, cruel intelligence shining deep in those sockets. He watched me walk to the altar with a cynical smile of approval, as if I were a pedigree horse he had just purchased. Valerius waited for me at the altar. He was magnificent and terrifying. An immaculate black formal suit, silver brocade vest, the wolf cane resting beside him. He did not smile when I reached his side. He took my hand. He was wearing gloves. Always gloves. The justice spoke the words, empty promises of love, honor, and obedience. I repeated them mechanically, my voice echoing on the cold stone. Valerius did too, his voice steady and emotionless. "The rings," the justice said. Valerius pulled a ring from his vest pocket. Heavy white gold, set with a square-cut dark emerald. He slipped it onto my finger. The metal was cold. It felt like a luxurious handcuff. "And now," Valerius said, interrupting the justice before the final blessing, "the ancient pact." Lorenzo in the wheelchair leaned forward, his eyes shining with eagerness. "What is that?" I whispered, pulling my hand slightly. "It wasn't in the contract. It's clan tradition," Valerius murmured, only for me, not looking at me. "To satisfy the old man and seal the leadership. Trust me. It's just blood." He removed the glove from his right hand. It was the first time I had seen his bare skin, pale, strong, with blue veins visible on his wrist. He picked up a small silver dagger from the altar. He made a quick, precise cut across his own palm. Rich, dark red blood instantly welled up. He turned to me, the dagger extended. "Your hand, Clara." I hesitated. The smell of blood in the closed air of the chapel was strong, metallic, but Lorenzo's eyes were on us, judging, waiting for a fault. And Valerius's eyes, there was a warning in them. "Play the game. Don't break now." I extended my left hand. He held my wrist. The touch of his skin was a shock, hot, alive. He cut me. It hurt, a sharp and quick sting. He pressed his palm against mine, blood to blood. The moment our blood mingled, something happened. The air in the chapel grew heavy, charged with static electricity. Valerius's eyes changed. The forest green darkened. The pupil dilated until it almost swallowed the iris, transforming the human gaze into something predatory. A very low, almost infrasonic snarl vibrated in his chest, audible only because we were pressed together. I felt his hand grip mine with excessive, possessive force, almost crushing my bones. The wolf, he was reacting to my blood, to the mingling, to the scent. For a second, I thought he might bite me right there. The Victorian mask of control cracked. I saw the naked hunger. I saw the beast he kept chained beneath suits and good manners and legal contracts. He leaned toward me. His nostrils flared, inhaling my scent as if it were oxygen. "Valerius," I whispered, frightened, trying to pull back. He blinked. He took a deep breath through his nose, visibly fighting his own instinct. The mask snapped back into place, cracked but whole. The green in his eyes lightened, although the tension in his jaw remained. He released my hand abruptly, as if it burned him. He pulled a white linen handkerchief from his pocket and quickly wiped the blood from his own hand, then wrapped mine. "It is done," he said, his voice hoarse, different from before. "Kiss the bride," Lorenzo rasped, banging his cane on the floor. "Seal the pact." Valerius looked at me. There was danger in him now. He leaned down. I held my breath, waiting for... What? He didn't kiss my mouth. He kissed my forehead. A dry, quick, almost clinical touch. But I felt the heat of his lips, his contained breath. "Come," he said, turning to the justice and his grandfather. "Dinner awaits." Lorenzo laughed, a dry sound like dead leaves. "Well done, boy. Well done." The wedding night was the final farce. We were led to the manor's master suite. A huge room, with a gigantic fireplace, thick carpets, and a 4-poster bed that looked like a stage set for a tragedy. As soon as the door closed and the servants left, Valerius moved away from me. He went to the window, opening it to the cold night rain, taking a deep breath as if he needed to clear his lungs of the chapel's scent. I stood in the middle of the room, still in the heavy wedding gown, my bandaged hand throbbing. I felt like a misplaced piece of furniture. "And now?" I asked, my voice small in the room's vastness. He didn't turn around. "There." He pointed to a discreet side door on the opposite wall, almost hidden by the wallpaper. "Your room is there. Connected but separate. Lock the door if you wish. I will not enter. No one will enter. Valerius, what happened in the chapel? The blood. You looked like..." "Don't ask." He cut in, his voice sharp as glass. He closed the window forcefully. "Go to sleep, Lady Moretti. It has been a long day. And the theater continues tomorrow morning." He began taking off his coat, throwing it onto a chair. He started unbuttoning his vest, his back tense, muscles visible beneath the thin white shirt. He looked like a caged animal, pacing back and forth. And I was in the cage with him. I walked to the side door. I opened it. A beautiful feminine room, decorated in shades of cream and pale pink. Cold. Lonely. I looked at him one last time. He was pouring a whiskey, his hand shaking slightly. "Good night, my husband," I said. He did not reply. He drank the whiskey in one gulp. I went into my room and closed the door. I turned the key in the lock. The click was the loneliest sound I had ever heard. I sat on the bed and looked at the bandage on my hand. The blood had already dried, but the feeling of his touch, of that possessive grip, still burned on my skin. The marriage was a contract. Cold. Legal. But the blood felt dangerously real. And the look he gave me in the chapel was not that of a business partner. It was that of an owner. The first months at Blackwood Manor were an exercise in balance on thin ice. I was not a prisoner, technically. I had access to the house keys, the accounts, the winter gardens. My mother, I learned through letters sent by discreet messengers, was settled in a country house in Sussex, with nurses and fireplaces always lit. Her cough had diminished. She called Valerius my savior in her letters. I called him my ghost. We saw each other only as necessary. At breakfast, where he read the financial paper and I reviewed the day's menus, exchanging short phrases about the weather or politics. At formal dinners with the clan associates, where I smiled, wore the right jewels, and deftly deflected conversation when asked about heirs. He watched me on these occasions. I felt the weight of his gaze, green and analytical, assessing my performance as if I were a high-risk investment. But at night, the wall between our rooms felt too thin. I would hear his footsteps, the sound of glass clinking when he poured whiskey late at night. Sometimes I would hear a low, frustrated growl when something in business or clan politics went wrong. And sometimes I would wake up with the feeling of being watched, only to find the connecting doorknob silently turned, then released. He tested the door. I never unlocked it. The routine broke in the middle of winter. Valerius needed to inspect the northern lands, properties bordering rival clans. It was a diplomatic and administrative trip. "The wife must accompany me," he said dryly at breakfast, without lifting his eyes from the paper. "An appearance of unity is essential." "Of course," I replied, buttering my toast with surgical precision. "Unity is our specialty." We set off in a closed carriage. The interior was luxurious, but claustrophobic. Valerius sat opposite me, reviewing documents, the wolf cane always by his side. He wore a heavy gray wool overcoat and new leather gloves. The scent of tobacco and cold rain filled the space. The storm caught us 3 hours from home. It was not ordinary rain. It was a biblical downpour. The sky went black at noon. The wind howled like lost souls. The carriage shook violently when a tree fell across the road ahead, blocking the path. The coachman tried to swerve. The rear wheel hit a root hidden in the mud. There was a loud crack, like a gunshot. The carriage tilted dangerously. I screamed, grabbing the seat. Valerius dropped his papers and grabbed my arm, preventing me from being thrown against the door. We stopped, tilted but whole. "Stay here," he ordered, releasing me. He stepped out into the rain. I heard muffled voices. The coachman, the mounted guards. Valerius returned minutes later, soaked. Water droplets ran from his black hair, dripping onto his aquiline nose. He looked less Victorian lord and more elemental. "The wheel broke the axle," he informed, closing the door against the wind. "We cannot move. The guards have gone to seek help in the nearest village. But in this weather, it will take hours." "We are trapped," I concluded. "We are safe," he corrected. "The carriage is solid. We have blankets. We just wait." He sat down again. The space felt smaller with the storm outside. The cold began to seep in. The carriage's small fireplace had gone out with the jolt, and we had no way to restart it. An hour passed. 2. I started to tremble. I tried to hide it, clutching my arms around myself, but my teeth were chattering. My traveling dress was elegant, not thermal. Valerius, who seemed immune to the cold, looked up from the papers he was pretending to read. "You are cold." "I am fine," I lied, my lips numb. "You are blue, Clara." He sighed, a sound of impatience. "This is ridiculous. Come here." "What?" "Come here. Body heat. It's basic physics, not a lascivious invitation." I hesitated, but the cold was physical pain now. I awkwardly got up in the tilted carriage and sat down next to him. "No," he said. "That is useless. On my lap. Now." I widened my eyes. "That is improper. No one is watching, woman, and I prefer a wife who is alive and scandalized than one dead of hypothermia. Sit." He pulled my arm. I had no choice. I fell onto him. He was hard, solid as stone, but warm. God, he was warm, as if he had fire beneath his skin. He opened his greatcoat and wrapped it around me, enclosing us in a cocoon of wool and heat. My back was against his chest, my legs over his. I remained stiff as a board. "Relax," he murmured near my ear. "I won't bite." Gradually his heat penetrated my clothes. I stopped trembling. My breathing slowed. His scent was everywhere. Musk, rain, and something deeper, more animal, that I only smelled when we were very close. He took off his gloves, put them in his pocket, and then his bare hands touched my icy hands. It was a shock. Skin on skin. He rubbed my fingers, trying to warm them. His hands were large, completely enveloping mine. "Better?" he asked, his voice lower, hoarser. "Better," I whispered. We stayed like that for a while. The sound of rain on the roof was hypnotic. His warmth was sedative. I felt his head lower. His nose brushed my hair. He inhaled. "Lavender," he said, almost to himself. "And sweet bread. You smell like home." My heart stumbled. I turned my face, just slightly, to look at him. Our faces were inches apart. His green eyes were dark, dilated. The mask of control was slipping. The Victorian lord was retreating, letting the alpha show. He looked at my mouth, then at my neck, where my pulse beat frantically. "Valerius, quiet," he ordered softly. He buried his face in the curve of my neck. I felt his warm breath on my sensitive skin. I felt his lips brush, just brush, the point where the blood flowed. A shiver that had nothing to do with cold ran down my spine. My hands, of their own accord, grabbed his shirt beneath the coat. He groaned. A low, vibrant sound that I felt against my back. He was going to kiss me, or mark me, and I wanted it. God help me. I wanted him to break the contract. His hand went up to my waist, tightening. His thumb drew possessive circles through the fabric. "Clara," he whispered against my skin. "You have no idea how hard it is." "What?" "Not to take what is mine." The phrase hung suspended. "Dangerous. Real." He lifted his head. Our gazes locked. The tension was electric, unbearable. I leaned toward him. He pulled away, abruptly, almost knocking me off his lap. "No," he said, his voice hard, breathless. "Not here, not like this." He opened the carriage door and stepped out into the pouring rain. "Valerius, you will—" He slammed the door shut. I watched him through the window. He stood in the mud, the rain soaking him in seconds. He held the cane so tightly that his knuckles were white. He was breathing deeply, his chest rising and falling violently, struggling to regain control. The wolf wanted out, and he was forcing it back into the cage with pure willpower. I was left alone in the residual warmth of his coat, feeling cold again, but for a different reason. The rejection hurt, but the revelation burned. He wanted me, not as a business partner, as a mate, and the fear in his eyes before he left wasn't fear of me. It was fear of himself, of what he would do if the barrier fell. When rescue arrived, hours later, Valerius returned to the carriage. He was wet, cold, and perfectly composed. The mask was back. He did not touch me, did not look at me, but I knew. The cage was cracking, and it was only a matter of time until it broke. The return to the mansion was silent, but different. The tension was no longer one of discomfort, but of anticipation. In the following days, Valerius avoided me. He worked late in the office. He ate in his room, but I started to notice small things. Fresh flowers in my room, not vulgar red roses, but lavender and white lilies, my favorites. A rare book of poetry I had mentioned liking weeks ago appeared on my bedside table, and when we were in the same room, I would catch him looking at me, not assessing, devouring. The contract said 1 year, but something told me the deadline was shortening. Winter was ending, but the real storm was just beginning, and it had a name. The Grand Winter Ball. The Grand Winter Ball was the social event of the decade. All the clans would be there, human nobles, industry magnates, and of course the ancient wolves. It was the perfect stage for Valerius to display his stability, and for Grand Duke Lorenzo to test his grandson's strength. For me, it was just another performance. I dressed with military care. The gown was deep emerald green velvet, the color of Valerius's eyes. It had a square neckline that revealed the curve of my neck, a requirement of the French modiste Valerius hired, and long, tight sleeves. The corset was so tight that breathing was an optional luxury. I wore the emerald and diamond necklace that belonged to Valerius's mother. It weighed like a golden collar. When I descended the grand staircase of Blackwood Manor, Valerius waited for me in the hall. He stood with his back to me, speaking with the butler. He wore an impeccable black tailcoat, white tie, and a black velvet cape lined with green silk. He turned as he heard my footsteps. and froze. Conversation died in his throat. His eyes swept over my body, from the satin shoes to the elaborate updo. He said nothing. He just stood there, staring, with an intensity that made my face burn. "Is it adequate?" I asked, nervous. He cleared his throat, adjusting his glove. "Adequate is a poor word, Clara. You are devastating." He offered his arm. "Let's go. We have wolves to feed." The Crystal Palace ballroom was packed. Giant chandeliers, orchestra, banquet tables. The scent was an intoxicating mix of expensive perfumes, champagne, and alpha pheromones. Valerius and I were the center of attention. "The king and his purchased wife," they whispered. But when Valerius looked at me, or placed his hand on my waist to guide me through the crowd, the whispers died. No one dared insult what the king claimed. We danced the first waltz. He was a perfect dancer, cold and precise, but his hand on my waist was hot, and his eyes never left my face. "You are tense," he murmured. "I am surrounded by predators," I replied. "You are with the largest one," he said, a dangerous smile touching his lips. "No one will touch you." The music ended. Valerius was called away by a group of council elders to discuss import tariffs. He hesitated. "I will be fine," I assured him. "I will get a drink." "Do not leave my sight," he commanded, before walking away. I went to the drinks table. I took a glass of champagne, trying to calm my nerves. "Lady Blackwood," a drawn-out voice said behind me. Or should I say, the beautiful Clara Moretti? I turned. Lord Marcus. He was the opposite of Valerius. Blonde, tanned, with an easy smile and blue eyes that undressed you. He was an alpha from a rival clan, known for his libertine parties and lack of scruples. "Lord Marcus," I greeted coolly. "It is Lady Blackwood." Of course. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of brandy and overconfidence. "They say you were a bargain. 50,000 pounds? I would have paid double." "My husband paid with honor, not just gold," I retorted, trying to move away. He laughed and blocked my path. "Honor? Valerius? He is an ice block, darling. A calculator. They say he doesn't even sleep in the same bed as you." He touched my bare arm, his fingers hot and unwelcome. "A waist. A woman like you needs warmth. Take your hand off me," I said low. "Or what? You'll call your master? He is busy." Marcus leaned in, whispering in my ear. His breath was warm and wet. "I can show you what a real alpha is, Clara. Not an accountant in a suit." His grip on my arm tightened. And then, the world exploded. I heard the sound of breaking glass from the other side of the ballroom. The music stopped. A sudden, terrifying silence fell over the party. I looked over Marcus's shoulder. Valerius. He stood in the middle of the group of elders. The crystal glass he was holding had been crushed in his gloved hand. Wine and shards of glass dripped onto the floor. But he was not looking at his hand. He was looking at Marcus, and his eyes were no longer green. They were black. Absolute blackness. The Victorian lord had vanished. Valerius began to walk, not with his usual elegance, with the heavy predatory stride of a wolf going in for the kill. People scattered from him as if he were on fire. "Valerius," Marcus began, dropping my arm and raising his hands in a mocking gesture of peace. "We were just chatting." Valerius did not stop. He reached us in seconds. He didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. He grabbed Marcus by the collar of his tailcoat and lifted him off the floor, with one hand. Marcus gasped, his feet dangling in the air. Valerius brought his face close to Marcus's. "You touched her," he said. His voice was not human. It was a tectonic snarl. "It was an accident," Marcus choked out. "You touched what is mine." Valerius threw Marcus. He didn't push him. He threw him. Marcus flew 10 feet and collided with a buffet table, knocking over plates, crystal, and an ice swan. The entire ballroom gasped. Valerius didn't even look where Marcus fell. He turned to me. He was breathing heavily. His gloves were stained with wine. He looked terrifying. "Let's go," he said. He grabbed my arm. Not gently. With possession. With fury. "Valerius, everyone is looking. Let them look," he roared, and the sound made the window panes vibrate. Let them see! He dragged me out of the ballroom. We passed the shocked guests, the guards, the double doors. He pulled me to the carriage, ripped open the door, and practically threw me inside. "Home!" he shouted to the coachman. "Now!" He got in and slammed the door. The carriage sped off. In the dark interior, we were alone. His breathing was the only sound I heard. He was on the other side, looking at me as if he wanted to devour me or destroy me. "You humiliated me," I said, my voice shaking with rage and fear. "This wasn't in the contract. Public scenes. Violence." "The contract," he snarled. "Didn't say I'd have to smell him on your skin." He ripped off his gloves and threw them onto the floor. His hands were bare. "You are my wife, Clara. Mine. On paper. In blood." He leaned forward, invading my space. "Do you think I don't feel it? The scent of another male on you? His desire? It is an insult. It is a threat. He only touched my arm. He wanted more, and I wanted to rip out his throat." He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect hairstyle. "I am losing control, Clara. I am losing my goddamn mind because of you. Because of me? I did nothing. You exist." He slammed his hand against the carriage wall. "You breathe. You smell like lavender and look at me with those eyes. And I forget. I forget the plan. I forget my grandfather. I forget that I am civilized." He looked at me with a raw, terrifying vulnerability. "I want you. And seeing another man near you made me want to burn the world down." I ran out of breath. The confession hung between us. Heavy. Undeniable. He wasn't angry with me. He was jealous. Irrational, primitive, overwhelming jealousy. I should have been angry. I should have been offended. But my heart was beating so hard it hurt. Because God help me. The idea that he lost control over me was intoxicating. "Valerius," I whispered. He shook his head. "No, don't speak. If you speak, I will do something I cannot undo." He leaned back against the seat, closing his eyes, his hands clenched into fists. The carriage raced down the dark forest road. And then, the world turned upside down. There was an explosion. Wood splintering. Horses screaming. The carriage overturned. I was thrown onto the ceiling, which was now the floor. I hit my head. Pain. Darkness. I felt arms around me, strong, protective. Valerius covered me with his body before the debris fell. "Clara," his voice, urgent, close to my ear. "Are you alive?" "Yes," I groaned. "What?" "Ambush. Gunshots. Bullets hitting the wood of the overturned carriage." "Stay here," he ordered. "Don't move." He kicked the jammed door. It flew off. He stepped out into the night. I heard snarls, shouts, the sound of flesh being torn. Valerius was not fighting like a man. He was fighting like a monster. I crawled to the opening. I looked out. There were 5 men. Assassins. Armed with rifles and silver knives. Valerius was in the middle of them. He didn't have his cane. He used his hands. And his teeth. I saw him break a man's arm. I saw him dodge a bullet with inhuman speed. But then, a shot landed. In his shoulder. The impact spun him around. He roared, but not in pain. In fury. He killed the shooter seconds later. When the last assassin fell, silence returned to the forest. Valerius stood among the bodies. His white shirt was red. He was breathing heavily. I climbed out of the carriage. "Valerius." He turned. His eyes were still black. He looked at me, then at the wound on his shoulder. "Silver," he said, his voice weak. "Marcus sent silver." He stumbled. I ran to him. He fell into my arms, too heavy for me to hold, but I held him. "You protected me," I sobbed. "You are mine," he murmured, consciousness fading. "Contract, or not." I fainted with him there, on the dark road, hoping someone would find us before the silver poison took my pretend husband, who had just become the most real thing in my life. The return to the mansion was a silent nightmare. The destroyed carriage was left behind in the forest, a skeleton of wood and velvet in the mud. We returned in the rescue carriage, sent by scouts who heard the shots. Valerius lay on the opposite seat, his head resting against the leather backrest, eyes closed. He held his wounded shoulder with his good hand, but the blood continued to seep, dark and slow, staining his white shirt and brocade vest. He did not moan, did not complain. He just breathed, inhaling and exhaling with terrible control, fighting the pain I knew was pure agony. Silver to a wolf was not just a wound. It was poison. It burned like acid. I sat next to him, taking his cold hand. He squeezed my fingers, weak, but present. "We are almost there," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "I am fine," he murmured, his voice slurred. The lie was so obvious it hurt. When we arrived at the mansion gates, organized chaos took over. Servants rushed with torches. The butler shouted orders. Valerius was carried inside, refusing the stretcher, walking with the support of 2 guards, proud to the end. They took him to the master bedroom. The clan doctor, Dr. Eris, was already there, alerted by messenger. He was a small, nervous man, smelling of ether and fear. "Silver," Eris diagnosed immediately, tearing Valerius's shirt. The wound on his shoulder was ugly, the skin edges blackened and smoking. "The bullet is still inside. It needs to be removed. Now. Do it," I ordered. I was covered in mud, my ball gown ruined, my hair loose and wild. But I felt more like a queen in that moment than in any ballroom. "Madam, perhaps it is better if you wait outside," Eris began. "I stay," I cut in. "Start." Eris did not argue. He prepared the instruments, steel forceps, scalpel, a cloth for Valerius to bite. Valerius refused the cloth. "Just do it." I stood by the headboard. I held his hand with both of mine. Eris began. The sound of metal scraping against bone was the worst sound I had ever heard. Valerius went rigid, his body arching on the bed. He did not scream, but a low strangled snarl escaped his throat. His hand squeezed mine so hard I felt my bones creak. But I didn't let go. "It's deep," Eris murmured, sweating. "Close to the artery. Take it out," I hissed. Another pull. A wet sound. And then the clink of metal falling into the silver basin. The bullet. Deformed. Shiny. Valerius collapsed onto the mattress, his breath coming out in a trembling gasp. "Done," Eris said, wiping the blood. "I will stitch it and apply a wolf-root poultice, but the fever will come." The silver entered the bloodstream. His body will fight. Tonight will be decisive. He finished the dressing, left instructions and vials of medicine, and left. I was left alone with him. The room was bathed in dim light, illuminated only by the low fire in the fireplace. The smell of blood and antiseptic was strong. Valerius began to shake, first lightly, then violently. His teeth chattered. His skin, pale moments before, was now flushed, hot to the touch. The silver fever. I soaked cloths in the basin of cold water and placed them on his forehead, on his neck. He writhed, mumbling nonsense. Names of ancient battles, account numbers, and my name, Clara. "I am here," I whispered, swapping the warm cloth for a cold one. "Don't let Marcus touch her. Marcus is gone. You beat him." He opened his eyes. The green was cloudy, glazed by fever. He didn't see me, not really. He saw ghosts. "Contract," he mumbled. "Clause 4. Broken. The contract doesn't matter, Valerius. Rest. It matters." He tried to sit up, falling back with a moan. "It matters because I lied." I paused with the cloth in my hand. "Lied about what?" "About business." He closed his eyes, a solitary tear tracing a path from the corner. "I saw you. In the library. You were proud. Broken, but proud. And I," he swallowed hard, "I wanted you. Not as a partner. As mine." My heart stopped. "I wrote the rules. To protect myself," he continued, the words coming out fast, feverish. "Separate rooms. No touch. Because I knew if I touched you, I would lose control, lose the coldness that keeps me alive." He laughed, a weak, delirious sound. "And I lost anyway. One touch at the ball, and I burned the world down." I looked at him, at the man who had built walls of ice around his heart, melting before my eyes. "Do you love me?" I asked, my voice trembling. He turned his face to me. The fever seemed to have burned away the barriers. There was only raw, naked truth. "I breathe you," he whispered. "Since the first day, you are the only real thing in this damned world of paper." He reached out a trembling hand, trying to touch my face. "Run away, Clara. While I am weak, run away before I trap you forever." I took his hand. I brought it to my lips. "I don't want to run away," I said. I took off my shoes. I climbed into the bed. "Clara." "Shut up, Valerius." I lay down beside him, over the covers, but close enough to share warmth. I pulled his head to my shoulder. "Clause 4 is voided," I whispered into his hair. "For good cause." He sighed. His body relaxed, the tension of the struggle finally giving way to comfort. He nestled into me, instinctively seeking shelter. "Mine," he murmured, already falling into exhaustion-induced sleep. "Yours," I confirmed. I stayed awake, listening to his breathing regulate, feeling the fever slowly start to break. The contract said we were business partners, but there, in that bed, with his blood on my clothes and his confession in my heart, I knew the truth. We were soulmates. And tomorrow, when he woke up, I would make sure he never forgot it again. The next morning brought a pale winter light and a silence that felt sacred. I woke up with the weight of Valerius's arm across my waist. He was still asleep, his breathing deep and regular. The fever had broken during the night. His skin was cool, color returning to his pale face. I lay still, watching him. Without the mask of coldness, without the armor of impeccable suits, he looked younger. Less king, more man. The scars of yesterday were covered by clean bandages, but I knew they would remain. Marks of a night when he chose to bleed for me. He stirred. His dark eyelashes fluttered and opened. Forest green. Clear. Lucid. He blinked, focusing on the ceiling, then turned his head and saw me. The initial shock was replaced by a slow, warm memory. "You stayed," he said, his voice thick with sleep. "You asked me to run away," I reminded him, stroking his hair. "I'm terrible at following orders." A slow smile curved his lips. "Good." He tried to move and winced in pain. His shoulder. "Quiet," I ordered. "You were shot with silver and fought 5 assassins. You are entitled to a day off." "A day?" He scoffed. "I have an empire to manage. Marcus needs to be hunted. The council needs to be appeased." "Marcus fled," I informed him. "Kian sent me a note this morning. He caught the first ship to the continent. And the council... Well, the council is too busy discussing how the Alpha King killed 5 men with his bare hands to worry about politics today." Valerius relaxed against the pillows. "So, peace? For now." He took my hand, bringing it to his lips. "What I said last night, in the fever. You said you loved me, that I was the only real thing." He looked into my eyes. It was true. Every word. My heart warmed. "I know." The following week was one of healing and consolidation. Valerius recovered with the supernatural speed of his kind. I took the reins of the household and, surprisingly, some of the clan's business, reviewing contracts and calming nervous investors with the same efficiency I used to manage the servants. Lorenzo died on the 5th day. It was quiet. He called me to his room. He was weak, his skin transparent. "You looked after him," he rasped, holding my hand with surprising strength. "I saw it, the way you defended him, the way he looks at you." "I did my part of the contract," I said. "To hell with the contract," he laughed, coughing. "You made him human, girl. That's worth more than any lineage." He closed his eyes and did not wake again. The funeral was solemn, grand. Valerius was stoic, the new patriarch, the uncontested supreme alpha. But when the ceremony ended, he sought my hand and did not let go. And then, the year ended, the exact date, the anniversary of our meeting in the library. Valerius called me to the office. The scene was identical to that of a year ago. Rain at the window, he behind the desk, the smell of tobacco and rain. But there was no frightened governess. There was me, Lady Blackwood. He was holding a piece of paper, the original contract, yellowed, worn at the folds. "Sit down, Clara." I sat. "Today the term expires," he said, his voice neutral, professional. "You have fulfilled all clauses, and more. Your mother is safe." Wynne Manor is in your name, free of debt. The money has been deposited." He placed a velvet box on the desk, and a pen, and a new document. "The dissolution of the marriage, signed by me. You only need to sign. And in the box, diamonds. A bonus for exceptional services." He leaned back, crossing his arms, his expression unreadable. "You are free." I looked at the objects on the table. Freedom, wealth, my old home back. It was everything I wanted when I walked into that library crying inside. I looked at Valerius. He was motionless, but I saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. I saw his hand tighten on the cane until his knuckles were white. He was giving me the choice. The real choice, without coercion, without debt. I stood up. I picked up the original contract. I walked to the lit fireplace. "What are you doing?" His voice cracked, losing its composure for the first time. "Renegotiating," I replied. I threw the contract into the fire. Flames licked the paper. The wax seal melted. The signatures turned to smoke. "I don't want freedom, Valerius," I said, turning to him. The flames illuminated my back. "I don't want diamonds, and I don't want Wynne Manor if it's just an empty house." I walked to the desk. I picked up the pen he offered for the dissolution and snapped it in half with a dry crack. "I want you. The wolf. The man. The husband." Valerius exhaled as if he had been punched. He rounded the desk in 2 long strides, ignoring the cane that fell to the floor with a dull thud. He grabbed me by the waist and lifted me, seating me on the oak table, messing up important papers, knocking over the silver inkwell. Black ink spread, but no one cared. "Are you sure?" he asked, his face inches from mine, his green eyes burning. "No contract, no deadline, no escape. If you stay, it is forever." I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him to me. "I am sure," I replied. "You were my riskiest venture and my greatest profit." He smiled, that rare, true smile that transformed the monster into a prince. "Then it is closed," he said. He kissed me. It was not a contract kiss. It was not a fevered kiss. It was a kiss of life, of promise, of 2 souls who found each other in the dark and decided to turn on the light. The office disappeared. The rain outside disappeared. There was only us. We started with a cold signature on a piece of paper. 2 desperate strangers playing chess with their lives. But we ended here, with our names written in fire upon each other's hearts. The contract was over. The rain began. And I knew, as he kissed me again, that there was no place in the world I would rather be than in this wolf's den. My home. My king. My love. Thank you for being here and for joining me for another story. I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you want, leave your comment. I love reading what you feel and think after each episode. Thank you for the love, and see you in the next story.